Shalom Aleichem, my dear brothers and sisters. In this video, I would like to discuss with you of the reasons why the Torah sometimes refers to certain actions of God in a physical manner. So, for example, there's a verse that says God came down in Exodus 16:20. Then there's a verse where God says, "I will go down with you to Egypt" in Genesis 46:4. And there's several verses like this where the verses refer to God's hand or God's eyes. The Torah says that God's eyes are upon the land of Israel from year to year. So the question is why. Now some of the non-Jewish faith, some of the other religions tried to use these verses to say that the Torah indicates that God could be physical, or come in a physical body, and they try to use these verses, and they use these verses sort of as a proof to say that see, God could be physical. So obviously from the Jewish perspective, this is nonsense. You ask any Jewish child, 5-year-old child, why does it say that? He will say, this is allegorical. This is not literal. When talking about the hand of God or the eyes of God, every Jewish child knows that this is not literal. But what I want to concentrate in this video particular is why does the Torah use these words? And I'll tell you my idea, like my understanding why. And I could be right, could be wrong, I'm not sure. But one thing for sure is that we know that obviously, the Jewish sages, like the Rambam, for example, says that the Torah basically speaks in the language of humans. It uses these allegories. They're not literal. But still the question stands why. And from the way I understand it is like this, that since God is completely abstract, he's something that cannot even be imagined at all. You cannot imagine God as a universe, for example, or as a cloud, or as even empty space. You cannot even imagine God as an empty space. He's not empty, he's God, right? But he's completely abstract, which with no physical phenomena whatsoever. Therefore, in reality, any word you use relating to him is going to be false in a way. Why? Because since he's completely abstract, you cannot really say anything about him if you want to be literal. So for example, even when you say God spoke to Moses, what does the word speak literally mean in a human language? Literally, the word speak or spoke or said something means what? That your vocal cords start vibrating, right? And the air starts to move in your throat, and the airwaves, get sent around, and the eardrums of other people receive those airwaves, and they hear the sound through the air. That's why, for example, in space, in outer space, there is no sound. There has to be an atmosphere. So, literally speaking, the word speak or said means that your vocal cords vibrated, basically, and the message was conveyed. Now, when the Torah says God spoke to Moses, how else are you gonna convey that message without using the literal words that we know of? Now, in the modern language, you can maybe use some words, something like conveyed, right? Like God conveyed a message to Moses, right? Or there's something called telepathy, where without speech, somehow God implanted in his brain, Moses' brain, a certain message, for example, right? Telepathy. But you gotta remember that all these words, they're fancy modern words. The language itself got developed, throughout the years, and today's English has all these fancy words which did not exist in the ancient languages. If you take the vocabulary of the Torah And I'm sure even other languages probably of those times. If you take the vocabulary of the whole Torah and the whole Tanakh, the vocabulary is not that great. It's not really that huge. There's a limited number of words that are used. And therefore, these fancy type of words that could mean certain meanings in an abstract form did not necessarily exist back then. And therefore, the Torah could not have used the words that did not exist back then. Now, to that, obviously, you can ask, but why didn't the Torah use the future words? Since Torah is written by God, and God is above time, God could have used the words that, even though they did not exist yet, but in the future they will exist, and in the future we would understand, or something like that, right? But in reality, if that was to happen, then there would be another problem. Why? Because the Torah is supposed to be understood in all generations. It wasn't just designed for the last generation or for the 21st century. So therefore, if the Torah used the words that did not exist back then to the people back then, the Torah would sound like gibberish, would make absolutely no sense. No sense at all. And therefore, they obviously wouldn't learn the Torah, and they would probably not even preserve the Torah. And what would be the point of the Torah if it cannot be understood? So therefore, from what I understand, that the best solution was for the Torah to be understood by all generations is to use the words that existed in all generations, that could be understood by all the generations, people 3,000 years ago and people living today. And not only that, the Torah is designed in such a way, and it's really amazing if you think about it, that the Torah is a book that can be read by a small child, a 5-year-old, 6-year-old child, and can be understood on his level, and the same book can be read by a 80-year-old sage who can also read it and understand it on his level. So therefore, the Torah has to be something that's understood by all. Now, using these fancy words, I'm not so sure that a child would be able to understand. And therefore, the Torah uses allegory, just like, even in speech, when we try to convey a message, we use parables, like an example, right? So same thing, that's what the Torah is doing. It uses example, parables when speaking about God. And I think these are the two reasons. The one reason being that, these words had to be, the words that the Torah chose had to be the words that existed back then. One reason. And second reason is that the Torah text itself should be a very simple text to understand for a child on his level and for an adult on his level. And so I hope that explains the reason why Torah uses allegory, but in no way, God forbid to even think that or to even say that, does Torah try to tell us that God is physical in some way. This is absolutely not true, and this would be actually heresy to say that. Thank you for watching.